Good morning. Come on in. I am Dr. John Beckman, Professor John Beckman, U.S. Senate GOP primary candidate in the state of Alabama. Vote for me March 3rd. So today we're going to talk about how Minority Report is coming. We are going to be able to predict human behavior in the future. And I'm going to talk about that in the context of these shootings, because I think that the time is coming where we will be able to not predict the time or place when one of these things will happen, but I do think that we will be able to determine certain genotypes of people, so natures of people, that are predisposed to having this type of behavior, and they will essentially be watched closely. But first, everybody, it's the morning, we need to wake up, get some coffee in a cup. Let's do a citation to the simultaneous libation of Scott Adams. Cheers. Good morning. Okay. So I don't know if you've seen the video Minority Report, the movie Minority Report. So basically what happens is it's this futuristic dystopian sci-fi movie, and the plot of the movie is there's a computer program that can predict when people, where and when and what crime they're gonna basically commit. And then the cops will go and arrest them before that crime actually happened. So we are getting closer and closer to that point. I don't think we're ever gonna do pre-arrests before something happens. I don't think that's gonna happen, but I do think that we are getting closer to the point where we are going to be predicting deviant behavior based on people's genomes, and those people will essentially be monitored on their social media. I think that that's coming. So one of the things that's already here is genome databasing. So there's two ways that when you hear genome sequencing, there's kind of two technologies here. One technology is you sequence the entire genome, you assemble the genome. That means you get every single base pair of that encodes a person's biology. That's sequencing their genome. That right now, the price of that is like $3,000 to $5,000 for an individual human being. And that goes down and down and down every year. So it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to sequence the entire human genome. Now there's another technology, which is like what 23andMe does, which is they basically have a little subset of a bunch of gene markers that they're looking at, and they sequence just little snippets from those many, many, many markers, okay? So that's a cheaper way to do it. It doesn't get you the full genome. It gets you like little snapshots of things you want to look at, if that makes sense. So that's already here, and that 23andMe, I don't know, what is it, like $100 or something, 20 bucks? So we already have 23andMe affordable to the average person. Now, 23andMe is not at a technological point where they can predict behavior, and I'm not saying that that is happening now. What I'm saying is that the price of a human genome is going to get so low that the government will eventually sequence the genome of every single person that is a citizen in that government. And I do think that then that government will search for and will essentially this is not something that I'm advocating for. I'm saying I think this is something that's going to happen, is the government will eventually get to a point where it knows the genomes of all of its citizens. Because it's just becoming so cheap that you want that type of information. So here's what I'm proposing, and this relates to the tragedies, the recent shootings. I want to ask the question, is there any genes that correlate with very, very disruptive behavior like shootings? So basically the question is, are there genotypes, are there genes or genetic mutations, possibly in genes that code for aggression, possibly in genes that code for hormone, possibly in genes that code for brain malfunctions? Are there any genes in humans that predispose you to committing shootings, mass shootings? And I would bet that there might be. Okay, so what I'm proposing is every time one of these shootings starts to happen, we should be sequencing the genomes of the shooters, and we should be starting to compile basically a database of the genomes of these shooters so that we can figure out, are there any particular genes that predispose you to being a mass shooter? Okay, so I'm saying we should do that. We should be looking at the genes of these shooters. Now, let me tell you why, because some people who are watching aren't as advanced in science. They might not know particularly what I mean when I say genes, and they might not know how that can correlate to behavior. So our genes, our DNA codes for basically who we are. It makes up our cells, it makes up our bodies, and it tells us in many, many circumstances how to behave. Our genes actually tell us and predispose us to certain behaviors. So let's talk about this in the context of mice. And this is the nature versus nurture argument. Is it your nature or is it your nurture? And nature is something that we're finding more and more and more and more has an impact on behavior. So let me talk about some mice studies. In mice, you can find a few genes that determine whether or not that mouse will be completely monogamous or polygamous. So if a mouse has a certain subset of a couple genes, it will never cheat on its mouse spouse. It rhymes, the mouse spouse. But if it has a different subset in place of those, a different set of alleles, so a different set of genes instead of those 4 genes, it will actually be polygamous and it will cheat. So we have already found mouse genes that tell the mouse you should be either monogamous or polygamous. So that is part made up in the mouse's nature. It's encoded in the program that runs the mouse. Okay? There's other locuses in these mice that code for nest building. So there's a single locus in mice that if you have this gene, you build better nests. You build very, very, very efficient, good nests. And if you have a mutation in that gene or a different allele, you don't build good nests. Okay, so nest building is controlled by a single gene in the mice genome. There's 4 genes that code for cuddling behavior that determine the length. So when a mouse has pups, the mouse will like cuddle and pay attention to those pups, okay? Just like a human mom will cuddle and pay attention to her human children. Now there's 4 genes in the mouse that program how long that mouse mother will cuddle with her pups, okay? So what I'm teaching you, these are just examples. These are examples of where very, very specific genes run the program in an organism and tell them how to behave. And the more that we learn about our genomes, our own genomes, dog genomes, human genomes, mouse genomes, the more and more we learn about those, the more and more we are seeing correlations with particular genes coding for particular behaviors. And often these genes are involved in hormonal pathways. So one of these genes might be a receptor pathway that, say, makes you more susceptible to certain testosterone activity or androgen activity or estrogen activity. And these hormones and these genes control actual behaviors. They make you predisposed to doing certain things. So what I'm saying, so now that I've explained that your genes run the blueprint of how you behave, now that I've explained that, what we should be doing, we should be doing this right now. Our government, the FBI, every time one of these school shootings or mass shootings happens, we should be sequencing the genomes of the shooter, and we should be looking to compile a database to figure out if there are deviant mutations or alleles, those are certain types of genes, that predispose these people to being or behaving in a way that is a mass shooter, to doing the mass shootings, okay? And then what you could do with that information is if you had the genome sequence of every individual, you could then say, okay, just like you can say this person is predisposed to getting breast cancer or this person is predisposed to getting testicular cancer. Like, we have the technology to do that. Maybe we should start asking the question, are this certain subset of people, they are actually predisposed to becoming a mass shooter. So maybe we send their teacher an email and be like, hey, like, double check on this person just to make sure that they're okay. So that, and maybe we have then machine learning computer programs that sort of monitor their social media. Now the social media, that's people posting what they think. That's people posting their most innate thoughts, okay? So, and they're posting it freely. So there's nothing wrong with the government like reading the social media. I don't think there's anything wrong with that because whatever you put out there, it's your free will to put that out there. And there's no problem with the government reading it. So we should have machine learning computer programs looking at people's social media. And if they start to see a pattern like that correlates with something that would be predisposing them to becoming a mass shooter, then cross-check that with their genome does their genome predispose them to becoming a mass shooter? And then if they got 2 bangs against them, then maybe you send somebody to like check up on that person. Okay? Like that might be a solution to this problem. So I'm proposing that we should, at the very, very minimum, this is not the only solution, this is a multi-variable problem, and I'm not saying that this would completely solve all the problems. I'm saying here's a creative way with which we can be observant, and we can look out for this type of thing, and we can hopefully, maybe, prevent some of these things from happening if we can understand some of the factors that predispose somebody to becoming a mass shooter. So I'll end there. Any questions? You can do another sip. All right, have a good morning. Got to go to work. Oh, if you like the videos, you can follow me at eaglewolfpack.com. You can follow my Twitter. You can share. You can comment. You can like. And you can vote for me in the primary, GOP primary, Alabama, U.S. Senate, March 3rd. End.